Redditors who knew murderers before they committed their crimes. What were they like? What was your experience with them? I knew a guy who burned down a house trying to kill a rival drug dealer. The drug dealer got away, but his entire family, including 3 children, as well as his girlfriend, were killed in the fire. The guy was a real piece of shit. He was dating a friend of mine's younger sister and I kept trying to tell her he was bad news. After he was arrested, she said, "I know he didn't do it. He's the nicest person in the world." I responded, "He has a fucking swastika tattooed on his chest." Had a good friend that shot his mother 7 times, threw her body on a pile of branches and set it on fire, then called the police to come pick him up. When I knew him, he could be your best friend, or if he felt slighted by you, your worst enemy. Literally could be the sweetest human or an absolute tyrant. Our grandparents lived next door and one day he came around looking for me, though I was at work, and he wound up spending 2 hours helping my grandparents move furniture. Another time hanging out with friends, he showed up covered in blood crying because he thought he might have killed someone at an earlier party. You just never knew what you'd get with him. Near the end though, he was slipping further into mental illness from everything I heard from friends. I had joined the army so I was gone, but my sister still was friends with him. The week before he killed his mother, he went to the police department complaining that he was getting messages from his computer to kill her. Edit. I confused a major point. When he went to police, he complained that his mother was trying to poison him. He did believe that he was receiving messages from his computer to kill her, but I can't say if he told police that initially. This happened 12 years ago, so my memory was off. Either way, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed suicide while still in a mental institution last year. A kid in elementary school. He had the weirdest, raspiest voice. He was nice but always talked about how he had staples in his head and all this stuff a 4th grader should not know about. He would also disappear for weeks at a time, like just not come into school. About 10 years later, while I was in college, I saw him on a Google News feed. Apparently him and his brother had beaten their father to death with a hammer. Couldn't find the article cause apparently kids beating parents to death is a pretty common thing. Mine all started when I let a strange girl use my cell phone late at night at the train station to call someone to pick her up. The someone who picked her up liked the way I looked and started texting and calling me. He seemed nice enough. It's a small town, so I said yes to a date. The date then ended up just hanging out at his house where he showed my photos of his newborn baby and asked if I wanted to be its new mother. I bailed as fast as I possibly could. The next 3 months were filled with him following me on my walk home from work, sitting out front of my workplace or house, getting into taxis with me, making me have to end the trips in public locations to get a new taxi. I ended up calling the police and that's the last I heard of him. A year later he was sentenced to life for rape and murder of a tourist while being high. My cousin. He got into a fight with my uncle because my cousin had stolen $800 from his mother. That night my uncle went to sleep outside on a chaise lounge with a sleeping bag. My cousin went into my uncle's closet, took his service revolver, walked outside and shot him in the head while he was out. He then dragged the body into the garage and left it there for 6 days while he went out to parties with his friends. When he got back, the sheriffs were there. Uncle was law enforcement, so when he didn't show up for work for a few days, they dispatched the sheriffs and took him into custody. My cousin was a big dude, but not very bright and not very sociable. He was a normal kid, but as he got into junior high and high school he became very quiet and withdrawn. When we were growing up, he was my buddy. We always looked forward to hanging out when the family got together. He'd only ever really talk about sports, but he was always up for anything, so we got into a lot of trouble and had a lot of good times together. I don't talk to him anymore. He is a member of the Aryan Brotherhood in prison, and only ever hit me up for money when I did visit. It's like he died too. My tiny town has had 3 murders in the past 25 years and I rode the school bus with our newest murderer, and my grandma lived next door to the murderer before that. The newest murderer was a kinda weird but not creepy kid who didn't really understand boundaries and talked about masturbation pretty often. He got suspended from school when he was 16 for getting caught masturbating at school and then again getting into a fight, and so he moved to the school in the next town over. Time goes by and when he was like 19 he killed his dad on Thanksgiving Day by shooting him in the back of the head with a shotgun and then drove around with his dad's body tied to the pickup truck for a while. He eventually went to see his mom and grandma with the body in the back of the pickup truck covered with a tarp. When his dad didn't show up for Thanksgiving lunch or dinner, they called the cops and they found the body and the son confessed. I know Michelle Eilenfeld from this case. Before this came to light, Michelle was fiercely insecure about her looks and incredibly flagrant about her drug dealing. She was a pathological liar that would lie about like anything. Things that didn't even matter, like having a lawyer uncle or wanting to be a paralegal. She wore heavy makeup and once started a bunch of Facebook drama because she tried to become a suicide girl model, got denied, and then tried to sell some very photoshopped nudes. Knew him in high school. We were never friends, but we hung out in the same crowds and we were friendly with each other. He seemed a little on the dumb side ahead, pretty laid back and go with the flow. Saw him in the papers like 15 years later for suffocating his newborn. I have known two. One was my dad's close friend. I always liked him. He was a very kind man and always the first to help someone in need. He was also always a very strange dude. One day he shot someone to death he didn't like and covered up the crime for years. The second one was my brother's ex-boyfriend. They had an extremely violent and vindictive relationship. After they split, the ex found someone new to abuse and ended up stabbing him. A few years ago, I attended a series of personal growth seminars and was paired up with a partner for certain assignments. He was definitely a troubled kid, much younger than the rest of the seminar participants, and I got the feeling his parents had signed him up to try to help him get his life back on track. I could tell he resented having to do the work involved, and at times he seemed angry about the ways his parents tried to control him. A few months ago, he attacked his parents and brother in a brutally violent way. His mom died, the other survived. I'd like to say it came as a complete surprise, but it really didn't. Guy that used to work with me shot a dude over drugs. He seemed like a nice kid. He was 19ish, I was 27, who was a little ghetto, but whatever. He was polite to all his co-workers and the customers. He also happened to live a few apartment buildings over from me, so sometimes I'd drive him to and from work. One night I got off really late, 2-3 AM, and he was outside my building and I remember he said, "Oh, there go Murazel, she cool. Don't fuck with her," to whoever else was outside with him. I never got harassed outside my building after that. There was a shooting a few blocks over and I just had this gut feeling it was him. But I was at work when it occurred and my building wasn't anywhere near the building it happened in, so it's not like I could have called the cops and said, "So I saw on Facebook there was a shooting in my complex a few blocks away," while I was at work, and my spidey senses telling me it was so and so. But it was a shame too, because he was really one of the better hoodlums I lived around. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve what he got, or that he was justified in his actions, but he could have done better with his life. At the time, he had been investigated for the murder, thoroughly, but nothing came of it. So I guess this was technically after the murder, but no one knew. Everyone thought he was innocent at this point. He was a friend of my husband's family and was at our wedding. Went to church with us, met our kid. We went out to meals with us. He seemed very normal. He was friendly and well spoken. My father-in-law told me he didn't believe it and that if this guy actually had done it that he would never be caught. Fast forward 8 years, he gets arrested and charged after an anonymous tip. Turns out he had forced his son to help him dispose of the body under threat and the son had finally came forward and provided evidence. I know two. One is the sister of a friend from high school. She murdered her newborn when she was 15 and is the reason for my state's safe haven law. I know her now, after her time in prison. I truly believe she was a lost, terrified teenager too scared to confront her Catholic family with a baby. She hid her pregnancy. She is a totally different person in adulthood. The second was a classmate. Went to school with him for 12 years. He was shy and quiet but always very laid back and friendly. He got high on every drug imaginable and murdered his parents with a homemade machete. It was brutal. Drugs are bad, kids. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button like it's a thick booty. And don't forget to subscribe to okpjdark if you like nice things, like new videos every day. See you tomorrow.